let's get into it. Did anyone get hostile with you about supporting Palestine? Fuck no. No, they did not. I miss Kaya a lot. I was like literally sitting by myself waiting for a breakfast sandwich at 5 a.m. I was fucking sitting waiting for a breakfast sandwich at 5 a.m. looking at TikToks of Kaya with tears in my eyes. 10K at the club, Hassan, please can I have 100? First of all, I didn't spend that. Go ask Ludwig. And no, the answer is no. Listen, I balled the fuck out. Okay, you know where I balled the fuck out? Fundraisers. That's where I balled the fuck out. Every time there's a fundraiser and I'm attending, I'm dropping 30 bills, 50 bills. You already know. That's where I fucking ball out. Anyway. So. The Warren liberals are coming after you and everyone on the left. Yeah, I don't care, dude. Dude, people who look at like an ongoing ethnic cleansing campaign and turn around and say, you know who's really at fault here? Crank leftist podcasters. Like, how unserious are you? Like, what a betrayal. What a classic definition of just like an unserious person who just does not give a shit about anything other than whatever the fuck is in their immediate trajectory. These are like children, okay? You can just like dangle a key in front of them and they'll go, oh my God, that's it. That's what I'm interested in. It is so frustrating, okay? It's so silly and it's so frustrating to be like, yeah, wow, while there is an ongoing active ethnic cleansing campaign happening in Gaza, 5,000 dead, 2,000 children have been ruthlessly slaughtered by the IDF. But you know who we should talk about? Chapo Trap House or the DSA. I am a real liberal and I hate the DSA. It's like, dude, what are you saying? What the fuck are you saying? This is what I mean. It's like there are so many people like this. There are so many people like this that basically would be more focused on getting an own on like their least favorite Twitter users if there was like a nuclear holocaust happening at the eve of ICBMs being launched from both America and Russia potentially. I could see these dumb motherfuckers literally getting up a couple last tweets being like, I told you guys that the crank political leftists were the real villains all along. And it's very, very stupid. I don't care. I try not to cover any of that stuff. I think it's like really, really silly and really unproductive. Because who cares? Anyway. If you want to go crazy, read Obama's blog post. Oh, man. So, Richie Torres is the main boss. He hates the DSA so much. It's too funny. Yeah, I mean, he's so unhinged. I think no normal person looks at that and goes, that's my guy. Okay? One of Chapo's earliest outspoken critics, who is also one of my favorite communist cosplayers, was making all those tweets while living in a $2 million home and married to the former editor of Maxim magazine. It's almost beyond parody. Damn, bro, why are you calling me out like that? That's me. I'm the one who's Chapo's favorite communist cosplayer critic living in a $2 million. Oh, mine is a $3 million home. And also married to the former editor of Maxim magazine. You know what I'm saying? Hating the DSA is like hating a disabled chihuahua. That's such a funny fucking take, man. Thank you. It's ridiculous because like the DSA for the most part is comprised of well-intentioned individuals who want to like fix people's taillights and shit. You know what I mean? Who like take the time out of their day to organize to go and like fix black people's taillights so that cops won't fucking stop them and harass them and shit. Like that's what the DSA does. That's usually what they do. They do like food drives and shit like that so that like cops don't fucking pull black people over and shoot them. Okay? It's mostly in most neighborhoods very white. Okay? It's relatively diverse, but certainly very fucking white. They get in their own way all the time. They're constantly fucking infighting. But they're well-intentioned people. It's so fucking ridiculous to just like act like they are an organized militia or a vanguard. But these people are insane. Like Richie Torres is just absolutely insane, dude. speaking of people that have lost their fucking minds, Richie Torres is always like this, but he's become even more like this in this past incursion, okay? He is so fucking unhinged. He only tweets about Israel. I'm like, bro, if I was living in his district, I'd be like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, what are you doing? Are you out of your fucking mind? Like, dog, you are not the congressperson of Tel Aviv. Like, what the fuck? You've tweeted more about Israel and like murdering Israel's enemies in America than you have about your own fucking district. What are you doing? What are you doing? What is happening here? I just don't even understand what is going on. Anyway, why am I quitting the DSA, an organization that believes that slaughtered Jewish civilians, including children and infants, are military assets who deserve their fate forfeited? Yeah, it's so funny that these guys are trying to do Red Scare shit, and you can't really do Red Scare shit in America right now because, like, Anne? Jesus Christ. Anyway. You can't do Red Scare shit in America right now because there's no red to be scared of. You know what I mean? There is no red to be scared of. So what the fuck are you doing? You're like, you're yelling at like someone entirely in the fucking margins. And it's so unimaginably stupid. Well, there was that guy who made fun of hipsters being murdered at the festival. Yeah, I don't even think, was that guy even affiliated with the DSA? That wasn't even a fucking DSA rally. And also, this is a classic fucking move to be like, look at this entire rally of people that are asking for Palestinian emancipation. And then here's this one fucking guy at the rally who says some unhinged ass shit. Let's not fucking focus on the main point of contention here, and let's try to make it seem like every single person. Oh, what the hell? My ear is ringing like crazy. I'm getting hit by the heart attack gun, I think. Anyway, the worst thing is liberals still saying vote Biden because Trump will be worse while Biden is supporting a genocide. They're literally so stupid. Yeah, I mean, there is no way to look at the situation and not recognize that there's literally no difference between Joe Biden and Donald Trump in this regard. Joe Biden is following through on the Abraham Accords, which Donald Trump set forth, okay? He is literally doing that. Him and Trump have identical opinions on Israel. There's no difference between what Donald Trump would do and what Joe Biden would do on behalf of Israel. 100,000%. Trump would just basically only say, like, Muslims are dogs. They're dogs that deserve to be fucking ruthlessly cleansed. But ultimately, the Palestinians are being ethnically cleansed. Regardless, Biden is championing it as well. If anything, because Trump would say that, you would probably see more fucking backlash from the goddamn liberals who are also ultimately reactionary and cannot arrive at a position on their own moral compass, but instead as a response to what the right-wingers are saying. It's the identical situation of BLM under Obama, which started under Obama. Black Lives Matter was a protest movement on the ground that started under Barack Obama, which was deeply unpopular. And then it became popular and became a mass movement under Trump because liberals were like, okay, yeah, Trump hates BLM, so we like BLM now. So the reality is that if Donald Trump was the one who was also saying the exact same thing that Biden is saying, you'd probably see more people on the ground, even more than right now, getting mad. You'd probably see the media at least covered a little bit differently. You want to watch the Piers versus Cenk thing live? Potentially, we can go to it, but the problem is the video won't be available in my country, so I don't know how I'll be able to see it. So, yeah, there's a lot going on that front as well, but this guy is out of his mind, okay? Richie Torres is just fucking out of his mind. I don't have a VPN, chat. I don't have a VPN. I do not have a VPN. I'm not going to download one of those like shitty-ass browser VPNs right now. Oh my God, everyone is collectively saying VPN. How about you use a VPN to avoid the top of the hour ad break, which I did not say, okay, because that's not allowed for me to say, but at the top of the hour, there is a 3-minute ad break. And if you no longer want to see those ads, all you need to do is subscribe, which you can do for $5 or free with a Twitch Prime, or by getting gifted a sub, okay? I will wait, or if there's some other way to stream it, by someone restreaming it, maybe I can watch it that way. But I'm not going to fucking I'm not going to get a VPN right now. Here's a 3-minute ad break now. What is this? Israel's intensifying war on Gaza. I think one of the most insane parts about like the historical references to what is going on in Gaza, in Palestine, and the plight of Palestinians is that like there is a almost universal acknowledgement from actual experts. You know what I mean? Jewish experts, Arab experts, Christian American, white experts, like anyone who has read about this issue recognizes what is going on. And for some reason, their perspective, their consensus almost, is not shared in mainstream news. The only time you hear from experts, like Holocaust experts, for example, Israeli scholars, for example, the only time you hear from them is when I cover it here, I show you what they have to say, or Democracy Now, or Majority Report. It's quite odd that mainstream media just simply completely avoids these people. They don't exist. Okay, you could have apartheid experts who have dealt with the South African apartheid. You could talk to people who have studied the Holocaust and what their current perspective is. You could talk to genocide experts and talk to, what they have to say, hear what they have to say. And it's very odd that they never do that. Instead, we just only hear from former and current IDF officials, former and current members of the Knesset who are, PR flacks for the Israeli government, activist organizations that work specifically at the behest of like combating anti-Semitism by conflating it to anti-Zionism. It's very odd, very, very odd that there is a wholesale refusal to talk to serious people that have made it their lives' fucking work to show exactly what is going on. Has having a shaky status ever affected your political opinions, like being ethnically Turkish but using a changeable right to stay as a U.S. citizen? Trump could change it, No. This is funny. This is a funny drill post. He said, the Middle East is complicated because it's bad to support smothering orphans in hellfire, but I also really want to graduate Harvard. That's a good one. Yeah. Really, really complicated political. YouTube used to autoplay Democracy Now! Sometimes, but now every next political is from MSNBC. So, you mean Gideon Levy, not Daniel Levy, I think. Levi is a really good expert who has been on a number of news channels, but not often enough. It's just, all I'm saying is, if someone were to, and I don't think it's going to be fucking Media Matters for America, even though I love that operation, there are certainly a lot of Media Matters people that are they don't have great takes on the matter in general. But I would say that I hope that they can do some analysis on like how many pro-Israel commentators have spoken and how much time they have spent speaking to them rather than people in Gaza or people who are Palestinian or pro-Palestinian activists or academics who have a unbiased and yet very nuanced opinion on the matter that, of course, goes entirely against the perspective that you hear from mainstream media. It is crazy. It is very, very frustrating to see this, okay? Very, very frustrating to see this reality play itself out. Yes, I saw the Argentina election results. Massa came in first after Milei, however you say it, had led in the polls by a lot, but his lead dropped in the last week or two, going to a runoff, which is still uncertain, but results from yesterday look heartening. Yes. He is too much of a crank, it seems. Like, the normal voter theory ends up winning even in Argentina, which you would not expect. In places where, like, there are a lot of crank thoughts. Like, I mean, think about it this way. Obviously, it's a very different country, but Brazil, crank thoughts won, right? Crank thoughts won with Jair Bolsonaro, and there was an expectation that like crank thoughts would win in Argentina as well. And it seems like regardless of the dire economic circumstances in Argentina in general, he was too much of a fucking crank. What does cranked mean in this context? Cranks are the fucking psychotic single issue voters that do not reflect like the broader majority or actually hurt coalition building in general when you're trying to win elections. Like in America, cranks are like gold standard cranks, for example. People that say we got to go back to the gold standard. The Ron Paul voters. People that have like really crazy points of view. No, gun rights cranks are not cranks. Gun rights cranks are actually broadly represented in the Republican Party. They have a broad majority. Their perspective might be insane if you're like European, but in America they are normal. They're normal voters. So, did you know that Javier Milei, sponsored by the Atlas Foundation, which is sponsored by the Koch brothers, these people are discussing characters who are in Argentina just to protect foreign interests and spark culture wars? Yes. Do you want to call when Cenk's on Piers? I can screen share the stream through Discord and you can just show that on your stream. Potentially. So let's move. Let's talk about what's going on. A second convoy of 8 trucks are now crossing the Rafah border. We're going to be covering that. We're going to get started with that.
Loaded with humanitarian aid crossed into Gaza from Egypt as the leaders of Israel and the United States promise a continued flow of desperately needed supplies. 14 aid trucks crossed the Rafah border from Egypt into Gaza on Sunday night, according to the United Nations. The day before, a convoy carrying medicines and food were allowed in for the first time since Israel tightened its blockade of the territory more than 2 weeks ago. The Rafah crossing is on the Egyptian border and it's the only route into Gaza that does not border with Israel. That means it's currently the only entry point for aid. Now, Israel's warning its military campaign against Hamas could last several months. The IDF says the next stage, a widely anticipated ground offensive, would happen soon. With more, here's our correspondent Wira Davis in Jerusalem and a warning you may find parts of his report distressing.
The human toll in Gaza is mounting. These casualties brought to the Al-Aqsa hospital in central Gaza are outside the zone from which Israel had told civilians to flee. It's not known from where the victims came, but many of the dead and injured are children. Some images, too distressing to broadcast, show the bodies of at least a dozen children.
We have been here since the crack of dawn, and the bodies have completely filled the hospital yard. This is in addition to the bodies in refrigerators, which are full. We don't have enough shrouds for the dead, because the numbers are huge.
Israeli airstrikes in response to the massacres of October the 7th are against what it calls strategic Hamas targets.
Presidential candidate Chris Christie. Governor Christie, great to have you back on the programme. I wonder if you could just start by giving me your reaction to the fact that 100 journalists were taken into a room and played unedited raw footage of these terror attacks on October the 7th, because so many people, fueled by social media, are simply refusing to accept.
What is Chris Christie going to say about this, dude?
Look, Piers, I think it's a testimony as to what I've been talking about for the past few weeks. The rise of anti-Semitism, both here in the United States and around the world, is palpable. It's been palpable for some time, and it's increasing. And we need
I hate that they got Cenk on this. Like, I hate that they got Cenk on this. I'm not gonna lie. His, Chris Christie's opinion on this matter is so fucking stupid. Okay, like, what the fuck? Fuck Chris Christie. What do you know? Shut up, dumbass. But also, Cenk, on the other hand, also has like incredibly reductive analysis on the situation. He always reduces it to it being a fucking religious war, to which I have spoken to him in private and told him that it is absolutely wrong to say that, because in America, the religious fundamentalist extremists, what do? What do they do when their material conditions are better than the material conditions on the ground in a place like fucking Gaza. What do? They go to fucking McDonald's, okay? They do weekend excursions, and then the 3%ers in our country, the religious fundamentalist extremists, they go to fucking McDonald's. Every now and then, there's stochastic terror that occurs, but overall, it's ridiculous to just like reduce this to some kind of religious war. It is not a religious war at all.
Is this proportionate, do you think?
Look, Piers, I think the Israeli Defense Forces and their government should have three priorities here. Priority number one is a retaliatory response against Hamas that severely degrades, if not eliminates, their capability of striking against Israel again. Number two should be getting the hostages out, as many of you as you can, both American and Israeli hostages that are being held now by Hamas. And then third is to try to have the response be seen as something by the rest of the world as setting the stage for conversations with the rest of the Arab world about how this type of conduct doesn't create a peaceful situation. In fact, causes great.
The rest of the Arab world. Why? What about the rest of the Arab world, bitch? What the fuck do you mean? He's like, it's not enough that we've already said all Palestinians are Hamas, but turns out all of the Arab world is Hamas, man. Everyone is Hamas. Notice how the terror designation in that regard, that conflation is deliberate. It's by design, and it helps with America's foreign policy in that region. Have you guys noticed that? That is the whole point. Everyone, dude, the rest of the Arab countries, they also need to fucking get their shit in order. We might start thinking they're Hamas too.
States with the British and others to the terror attacks on 9/11, who believe that if we don't learn the lessons from what happened there, 20 years of mayhem pretty much coming out of our response, that if Israel does go in with a full-blown ground invasion, then it could lead to a far more serious situation than even the one we have in front of us now.
Well, Piers, look, Israel has an absolute right to protect both its safety and its territorial integrity. And the only way to protect that safety and territorial integrity is to degrade the capability of Hamas to do what they did on October 7th again. And the Israeli Defense Forces are going to have to make the judgment.
Yeah, to degrade Hamas's capabilities of doing October 7 again requires the elimination of the apartheid. That's it. Not continuing to squeeze the Palestinians further and radicalizing them.
You're running for president. Donald Trump is still the front
Fucking
runner.
so dumb.
Many people think extraordinarily. Given
every single person running for president right now in the United States of America that's like a serious candidate, every single person unconditionally on the Republican primaries, and Joe Brandon, and I guess like RFK Jr. as well. Like, these are all people who have the exact same perspective on Israel and Palestine and how the Israeli government is currently dealing with Palestinians. Every single one. There is a overarching bipartisan consensus on it. Why? Because it's a byproduct of American foreign policy. Because America's foreign policy is the area, especially because it makes a lot of money for the military-industrial complex, is an area where there is always bipartisan support. You can always find money in the banana stand for America's weapons. You can always find money in the banana stand for America's incursions in the Middle East and its war on terror and its impact on destabilizing entire regions of the fucking planet. There's always bipartisan consensus there, even under Donald Trump. If you remember, Chris Murphy would talk about how, who is a Connecticut senator, he's a Democrat, he would talk about how, like, Donald Trump is weakening our efforts to do coups in Venezuela. That's a fucking Democrat. Where are the peaceful doves? They would literally criticize Trump and claim that he was an isolationist and how bad that was.
As far as China's concerned, his quote-unquote trade war, this is a guy who said he got the greatest trade agreements ever with China.
He's like talking shit about Donald Trump, but he agrees 100%. It's ridiculous.
Done 25% of what they said they would do and committed to in those trade wars. So the idea that when he calls President Xi brilliant and straight out of central casting, that somehow deterred the Chinese, I think
it's so dumb.
He also called Hezbollah.
By the way, talking about China in this regard, as it pertains to Israel-Palestine, is almost as dumb as thinking that, oh, there's Chinese carriers that were pushed towards American positions because China is going to come and defend Palestine. Let me tell you something, okay? If you are completely oblivious to the geopolitical the geopolitical conflict and also the history of other nations, not just the United States of America, but other nations and how they view Israel and Palestine, yeah, you're probably going to look at that and go, oh my God, China is going to defend Palestine. You are out of your fucking mind, okay? China has been the number one two-state pushers out there. You want to know why? Because they're their number one weapons purchasers. It's crazy. It's crazy to think that like the number one weapons purchasers, the second most important trade partner to Israel after America, is going to turn around and fucking go, yeah, we're actually going to defend Gazans. We're going to defend the Palestinians. You are delusional. You are out of your fucking mind if you think that that's going to happen. And you are so unserious. Okay? Same with India. If you think India, which is even more laughable, to consider that India is going to protect Palestinians, you're fucking out of your mind.
It's the highest rate of deaths in 2 decades. Many are saying that a lot of this is down to incendiary.
He loves pushing this to show how impartial he is. Like, oh, look at me criticizing Bibi.
Particularly cite Bezalel Smotrich.
In any case, they're part of my government, but they're part of my government, and I decide policy.
But do you distance yourself from comments like that?
There are many comments.
When he called for the Palestinian town of Awara to be wiped out?
Of course not. That's totally unacceptable. We don't believe in collective punishment. I go after the terrorists. I go after those who support the terrorists, but I don't believe in collective punishment.
Now, many people think what we're seeing now, Governor Christie, is collective punishment, that thousands of completely innocent Palestinians are getting killed as Israel tries to go after Hamas, who, of course, embed themselves amongst the civilian population. Like I said earlier, that number's only going to increase exponentially if there's a ground invasion. It's hard to see this as anything other than an attack on Palestinians in general, because you can't be selective, can you, in the way that is being currently implemented by Israel?
Well, the people who say that, Piers, I think believe that Hamas should be rewarded for being sneaky. Hamas should be rewarded for doing a sneak attack on Israel, killing 1,400 civilians, and then going back and hiding themselves among civilians and thinking that by using them as human shields, they're going to prevent Israel from taking any retaliation. I'm sorry. I don't agree with that. I think Israel has to take the retaliation. And if Hamas decides to embed themselves with civilians, then those civilians' complaint is against the government they elected, not against the state of Israel.
Should Benjamin Netanyahu stay as prime minister? Notwithstanding there's a war now, the vast majority of Israelis in the polls I've seen think he is responsible for what happened. He always said that protecting Israel and defending Israel was his number one priority. This has been the biggest failure of Israeli defense that we've seen in modern times. Should he remain in office?
Look, that's up to the Israeli parliament and what they do in terms of a vote of confidence or no confidence in.
Yeah. The irony of people talking about Hamas or people talking about Palestinians and Israelis, the irony, of course, is that Israel has mandatory conscription, so everyone has to serve. So, like literally everyone over a certain age has like served at a certain point, except for the Orthodox Jewish members of Israel that get a religious exception, and some people that literally go to jail instead of serving in the military. On top of that, the IDF has literal like headquarters inside of a goddamn mall. But of course, if Hamas had turned around and fucking blew up that headquarters and it killed a shit ton of civilians as a consequence of that, absolutely zero people would say, wow, well, Israel's using human shields. No, they would say this is completely unacceptable. These mass atrocities are completely unacceptable. They're war crimes. Israel should level fucking Gaza. That's what they would say. Okay? Because it's not an issue where you see the humanity of one side. That's it. Okay? That's it. That's it. If you don't see the humanity of the Palestinians, it's very easy for you to say, that holy fucking straw man. This is not a straw man at all. This is not a straw man at all. And by the way, I'm not saying it would be adequate or apt or reasonable or justifiable or morally permissible to do that. Okay? I'm not saying that at all. I'm showing you, however, the double standard. As a matter of fact, this is at the heart of my criticism of what Israel has done in Gaza this time around and time again. Okay? It is the untold amount of civilians that they murder that they claim are just simply human shields. This is a ridiculous thing to keep pushing, a ridiculous line to keep pushing. And it doesn't work in the opposite direction, okay? It doesn't. Why? Because Israelis are our neighbors. Israelis are people that we know. Israelis are closer to us in their existence than the Palestinians are. Palestinians, on the other hand, are Arab, Muslim. We have only seen Palestinians as enemy combatants, not necessarily just Palestinians, but just Arabs and Muslims in general. We have only been trained and conditioned into seeing as enemy combatants for the past 20 fucking years. So automatically, when you see an Arab child, you think, yeah, that's a terrorist. That's a terror baby. That's a terrorist child that is slated to be killed. Of course, that's going to happen because that's what we're used to watching on television. Okay, you had to manufacture consent for Iraq. You had to manufacture consent for our meddling of affairs in Afghanistan and our occupation in Afghanistan and Iraq in general. And the way to do that is through dehumanization. And it works in the direction of Palestinians as well. So most people don't fucking think about Arabs, especially Muslims, and they're killing Christians too, right? The IDF is killing Christians as well. It doesn't matter. We don't see them as like real human beings. We see them as terrorists. So no amount of untold cruelty that we subject them to is going to meet the same standard that we would apply to Israeli civilians and Israeli citizens in general. This is 100%. This is 100% happening in front of your eyes every single day. And anyone that actually, knows Palestinian people or knows Arab people, are Arab themselves, or have friends that are Arab, have family members that are Arab or Muslim, they recognize it because they're like, well, this is my neighbor. This is my friend. This is a human being. And human beings that look like him, that talk like him, that have, the same dreams that we all share, that want to live a life of dignity and respect, are being slaughtered ruthlessly. They're being slaughtered mercilessly, and that's completely fucked up. You can't hand wave all of that away by saying Hamas, 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 Hamas. You can try to keep dehumanizing the Arab world, but ultimately people recognize that this is completely unacceptable. Anyway, having said that, let's see what fucking Cenk has to say on Piers Morgan today.
Welcome back to Uncensored Live from New York City. Pro-Palestinian protests since the Hamas terror attacks of October the 7th have highlighted a chasm between progressives and the Jewish community. Marches this weekend faced criticism and police inquiries for pro-Hamas chants and banners.
Well, you got it. They wrote his last name wrong.
Harvard were accused of anti-Semitism for a public letter claiming Israel was entirely responsible. Climate activist Greta Thunberg posted then deleted a picture pledging unequivocal support for Gaza. It's all led some commentators to ask why progressives and the left seem to stand by all minorities, except it appears Jewish people.
Oh, God. Oh, that's so fucked up. Oh, God. Oh, this is so bad.
Online channel, The Young Turks, a Democratic presidential hopeful. And that's Cenk Uygur. Cenk, great to have you on the program. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. I'll be following your tweets with interest this week. You've been getting increasingly angry, I think it'd be fair to say. You said, I'm now enormously frustrated by US and Israeli government's barbaric acts in Gaza. I will not be shy in sharing that opinion on Piers Morgan's show today. Why are you so frustrated?
Yeah. Well, honestly, I didn't expect the framing that you put on this segment, and it's framing like that. That's disgusting. So I don't see what this has anything to do with anti-Semitism. I formed Young Turks and TYT with two Jewish friends who are some of my We've known each other and been brothers for over 40 years now. So I think what Hamas did is disgusting. I cry for those Israeli innocent civilians. But do I see you guys crying for Palestinians? I mean, Chris Christie was just on here treating it like it's no big deal because what, Palestinian lives don't matter? I think the real bigotry here is saying that Palestinians, we can kill 3 times as many of them already, and this is the appetizer. Netanyahu and his barbaric government have not even started the entree of murder and death and mayhem they're about to do, and that's somehow okay, killing 3 times as many Palestinian civilians, let alone the occupation, which is bigotry by definition. We say that everyone in the world can defend themselves, can have their own state, can have sovereignty, except the Palestinians. And the reasoning behind that is the Palestinians are what? They're what? The idea is that they are savages and that Muslims are too violent and cannot control themselves, so they must be occupied for 56 brutal, disgusting years. So I've had enough of the bigotry against Muslims and Palestinians, and I need you to speak out against that instead of covering every outrageous, atrocious action of the right-wing government of Israel and going, oh, it's anti-Semitism. No, and there is global anti-Semitism. There's anti-Semitism here in this country. 2 synagogues were shot up, Pittsburgh and in Southern California. We fight against that all the time. But then whenever Israel is criticized, people go, oh, no, it's anti-Semitism. No, there's real anti-Semitism. Instead of attacking that, all you guys ever do is hide behind the veil of anti-Semitism. Do you know why Palestinians might not like Israelis? Because they've been oppressed for 56 straight years.
I hear you. And let me respond. I'm not you guys. I don't think I fit into any neat
on this issue at all. He always has to fucking go back to that.
I've actually covered this story, I think, more fairly than most people. I've had many pro-Palestinian voices I've given a huge platform for. They've been getting enormous
every time, dude. Every time my man's got a sidestep. Every time.
And I've done that quite deliberately because I think these voices are important to be heard, including yours. I certainly wasn't accusing you, by the way, or your organisation of anti-Semitism. I have found it, as somebody who's always identified as liberal myself, I found it very dispiriting to see people who call themselves liberals.
Big time lib, dude.
Whose instant response, it seemed to me, to one of the worst terror attacks we've ever seen was to immediately side with the place where these attacks have been launched from. Now, I don't tar all Palestinians with the brush of being Hamas at all. And in fact, the sooner Hamas are out of there, the better for the Palestinian people and the world. But I just think the only human response you can have is, as you did, by the way, to your credit, is it was disgusting what happened on October the 7th. Now, the question then becomes, what is a proportionate response by Israel? Not just to the terror attacks of October the 7th, but obviously there is now a huge ongoing escalation in what has been, as you rightly say, a 56-year war, effectively, in varying degrees over that period. And that's where I think I'm struggling.
He's a coward who hides behind disproportionate response to be like, but they should keep doing ethnic cleansing.
Mass deaths of Palestinian
Get in there, Cenk.
Civilians.
Rip him. Rip his ass. Rip his fucking ass. Call him a baboon in a suit.
I think it will have the opposite effect.
Yes. So let's take it one at a time. First of all, as you rightly point out, on Young Turks, we covered the atrocious actions of Hamas right from the get-go, and we condemned it as fully as anyone can possibly condemn it. Because not only are they killing those poor, innocent Israelis that didn't do anything, those little babies and the grandmothers, it's disgusting what they did. But on top of that, they're ruining the Palestinian cause. They've burned the moral high ground to cinders.
Oh God,
and then
I hate this.
on top of that, they smear all people of Muslim background like myself, and then it unleashes this bigotry of anti-Muslim bigotry throughout the world that I'm sick of. So screw Hamas and their barbarism. Okay. Now, in terms of a proper reaction, yes, you need to get those hostages out. So now let's look at I'm going to suggest what to actually do. I'm going to be constructive, but first let's look at the unconstructive solution that Israel had. Dropping bombs on residential buildings. 50 ambulances have been hit. 10 out of 25 hospitals don't operate anymore. The incubators are about to run out of energy. There's 45 babies that might die today. The parents, I just read on CNN, are writing the names of the kids on their calves, on their legs, so that if they are killed in a bombing and they're mutilated, they could find their bodies. Imagine writing the name of your child on their legs so that you could find them in the rubble after Israel or any government drops a bomb on them. And I need the West to understand something. Bombs kill people. And do you know how they kill people? They incinerate them alive, or their heads explode. So what happened in Israel was a disaster and disgusting. But you have to be equally honest and equally outraged at the immorality of incinerating babies and grandmothers and aunts and uncles, which is what we're doing right now. America cannot keep sending aid for death and destruction. Enough of the occupation. End it today. End it today. It's monstrous. Okay, I'm going to get to the constructive solution.
I completely understand your passion and your anger.
But you don't agree with them. But you don't agree with them.
I, like you, want to see some resolution at the end of this horror that we're witnessing.
Come on, man. Don't when he condemns Hamas.
How do you get rid of Hamas?
Man. I've condemned Hamas more than he has. Shut the fuck up. That's not what I'm ughing at.
Currently doing it. How do you actually eradicate
the fucking optics argument for the liberal West is so stupid. Shut the fuck up.
Terror group who've quite deliberately, in my estimation,
Hamas really lost its moral high ground? What do you mean?
Such appalling scale that they knew that this
Palestinians
would go
are being ethnically
Israel
cleansed
into this kind of response.
The idea that like you lend any credence to Hamas's actions being like representative of Palestinians is ridiculous.
We don't know the answers to yet, but it seems to me that Israel could, if it's not careful, be being lured into a massive trap here, and I hope that is not the case. But I'm curious, how do you get rid of Hamas if you don't do it the way Israel is currently doing it, albeit with horrific collateral damage in the face of thousands of innocent Palestinians being caught up in the bombing?
Yeah. So let me give you a short-term answer, long-term answer. And a lot of people are not going to like these, but these are realistic ways that you minimize civilian casualties. You do what America did with the Osama bin Laden raid. We didn't go drop a nuke on Pakistan. We didn't go destroy 6,000 residential buildings.
Oh, I don't agree with that.
We sent in special forces.
That's insane.
Is it more dangerous to the special forces?
Did he just say we should do Afghanistan? We should do Afghanistan? What the fuck?
Does it look like Israel's trying to find the hostages? If I have a family member that's a hostage, I'm disgusted by what Netanyahu's doing now. How do you know they're not in the buildings you're dropping bombs on? How do you know they're not in the tunnels you're dropping bombs on? How do you know they're not in the hospitals you're dropping bombs on? So if you want the hostages rescued, every rational human being can agree this is not the way to do it. This is the way to do death and destruction for the sake of death and destruction. It's collective punishment. It's genocide against Palestinians, and the world has to speak out. So my way is
he's talking about the raid in Pakistan. Okay, got it.
Folks dying on both sides. I understand that. Those are super hard choices. But go find Hamas. Go find the hostages.
Okay, he's right.
Go rescue them.
He's right.
Instead of wantonly, indiscriminately, killing after killing. And let's be honest, when you drop a bomb and a kid's head explodes and a grandmother is incinerated, that is terrorism. Killing 3 times as many civilians as Hamas is terrorism.
3 times.
And it's the same if it is done by a government. Send in as many special forces you got. We should send in whatever you got to actually do the job at hand instead of what Netanyahu is doing, which is to kill these people to send a message. And think about how unrealistic that is. And think about why his method has a 0% chance of working. How are the Palestinians supposed to rise up against Hamas? How would they prove they're against Hamas? Hamas ended all elections. Hamas ended democracy.
That's not true.
How are the Palestinians supposed to cry uncle?
He's not right about that.
They're already crying uncle.
They've never been able to hold elections without Israel and America's telling them to do so.
More babies killed. That's what his answer is. And it's this. And the United States of America, I'm running for president here. There's no way in the world I would allow this. Sending $105 billion. And it doesn't even go to Israel, Ukraine, or Taiwan. It goes to the defense contractors that bribe these greedy American politicians and then get most of that money. And so the long-term answer is 1967 borders and the biggest walls you've ever seen in your entire life. And no one's allowed to cross to either side. But the Palestinians get their state. It is unconscionable for them not to get their state. And if you're a moral person, of course you believe that the Palestinians are not the only people in the world that cannot govern themselves. If you say that, you are being, by definition, bigoted and a racist. We have to have two-state solution immediately. If 56 years of occupation and brutalizing these people is not enough, is 57 years going to be enough? Is 156 years going to be enough?
He's
I'm
right.
asking Israel, not out of hate, out of love. So many of my friends that I grew up with are Jewish. This is not good for them. This is not good for anybody. Please look into your hearts, look and be the moral people that I know you can be. I've been to Passover dinners where you pray for your oppressors. Now, it breaks my heart, but I got to tell you, you got to pray for those you are oppressing. And to say that you are not oppressing the Palestinians after brutalizing them for 56 long years, you're kidding yourself. And as a friend and an ally, I'm trying to get you to wake up and snap out of this trance. You cannot keep doing this. It is ruining your moral fiber.
Cenk, Uygur, thank you very much indeed for joining me. I greatly appreciate it.
We're on that
sorry
Uncle Pack,
your
dude.
first appearance on this program under these circumstances, but I hope it won't be your last. I think you're an important voice in this, and I do appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you very much.
I'm Uncle Pilled.
Well, on to the next.
This is the most Uncle Pilled I've ever been in my life. You know, he did a really good job. No notes. I would say I misunderstood what he was talking about with Afghanistan. He was just talking about the raid in Pakistan, the Osama bin Laden raid. But overall, I think that there are more productive ways to have that conversation. At the end of the day, if you want to starve out Hamas, which is something I say all the time, if you want to starve out Hamas, you have to go back to a time and reframe your understanding of how to treat Palestinians in a humane way at a time when Hamas was not so popular, at a time when Hamas was actually at 3%, at a time when Hamas wasn't even a militant group that was dedicated to violently resisting against the occupation, and instead was simply just still an Islamist fundamentalist group, but a fucking charity organization, okay? This has happened over the course of the past 30 fucking years. More than 30 years. Ultimately, the way to starve out Hamas and rid it of its power is to ensure that Palestinians have equal rights and equal representation. That's how you starve Hamas. That's how you destroy their stranglehold that they have. The notion that they also the Palestinians voted for Hamas or whatever is also a silly one, because Palestinians have never been able to have a fucking fair and free election. Even the 2006 election was actually done because the American government wanted them to have this election, even though the members of Fatah openly had stated to the Americans, which they were collaborating with at the time, that this was not the right time to do elections. They were not ready for it yet. And yet America still pushed for it, and then also tried to facilitate a coup, which solidified Hamas's power in Gaza entirely. Okay? So there's never been a there's never been a serious conversation about what Palestinians want, what Palestinians could get, because there's never really been a democracy. There's never been a real democratic process. You can't have a democracy when you're running an apartheid state. You can't have a democracy when you are under occupation. How can you have a fair and free election when you are not free? That is the question. It's ridiculous. Anyway. The source of Hamas's power is the misery of the Palestinian people at the hands of Israel. Combat that misery and it destroys Hamas's power. Exactly. I must say that if you have an open mind, Cenk made his point very easy to understand. I will now pick up my jaw. Yeah, no, he did a great job. I think Cenk, I'm so incredibly uncle pilled right now. I've never been more uncle pilled than I have in my entire life. What an incredible performance. I'm gonna text him right now. I'm gonna tell him. Yeah. To be fair, killing one Osama seems more easy than rescuing 200 kidnapped people. Yeah, except it's very obvious that there is no interest in rescuing the 200 people. So much so that Israel, as far as I understand, and I might be wrong on this, but Hamas, by way of Qatar officials, had said that they wanted to release 2 Israeli hostages due to the humanitarian constraints that they currently have. 2 of the hostages are very badly either ill or they were very badly wounded, from what I understand. And Israel said no. They said no. And they still release those hostages to Egypt anyway, today. So the idea that like, Israel is taking great consideration over the hostages that are in the hands of Hamas is fucking ridiculous. They've openly stated that they don't give a shit. They don't give a shit at all. Here it is. News. 2 more hostages have been released from Hamas custody following the Qatari and Egyptian mediation. Sources tell J.M. Hansler, Marquard, PA, Alex Marquard, and me. The 2 hostages are Israeli citizens Nurit Cooper, 79, and Yosheved Lifshitz, 85. They say those Israelis they took are anti-government, so they don't really care about them. Yeah, I don't know why they said that they do not want to fucking have these hostages. They would not actually take this seriously. Breaking, the Wall Street Journal reports that the negotiations for the release of 50 hostages fell apart because Hamas demanded the delivery of fuel into Gaza. That's crazy. Now, for people... Oh, yeah, here's what it was. Here's what the fuck was going on there. I'm going to cover this hostage swap right now, hostage release right now. So what originally happened, as far as I understand, is Hamas says Israel's refusal to accept 2 captives shows it's not serious about stopping the bloodshed in Gaza. Israel's prime minister's office has confirmed that Israel declined to accept 2 Israeli hostages from Hamas, stating that they will not address what is considered to be mendacious propaganda by the group. It is so fucking insane to me that Israel time and time again shows their fucking ass in this situation over and over and over again. They're like, nope, doesn't matter. Hamas set free 2 more civilian hostages on Monday, but negotiations over the possible release of a group of 50 captives stumbled over the militant group's demand that Israel allow fuel deliveries in the Gaza. It is so crazy. Like, how are you getting outflanked by fucking the Al-Qassam brigades? You are a multi-billion-dollar American state, okay? You are the unsinkable aircraft carrier in the Middle East. How the fuck do you get outflanked? Like, how arrogant, how inhumane, how cruel that you're just like, no, we know that the hostages that you want to release are going to make you look good. We don't want the hostages. That's insane. That's an insane thing to fucking do. It blows my mind. Like, imagine being like, well, nope, they're virtue signaling. We can't do that. The cynic in me thinks they wouldn't be able to control the narrative if these hostages come back and start speaking propaganda for Palestinians, aka supporting a ceasefire, for example. You just know that how they'd spin it. They're already arresting Israeli citizens for it. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. I'm not saying that these ladies are going to be fucking kind and say that, like, no, Hamas was very humane to us. I don't think that, okay? I don't think that at all. But it's wild. It's wild that, like, your immediate concern isn't just, like, bringing in hostages that Hamas is voluntarily delivering without any conditions. They're saying, listen, these ladies, they're going to fucking die. So we have to release them. We want to release them to you. That is a good faith negotiation in that situation. To turn around and go, nah, man, it's cool. U.S. President Biden said he's talking to Israelis to delay an expected ground invasion to facilitate negotiations for captive releases. Palestinian woman shares their experience of the Rafah border crossing. We already saw that. We're going to cover that in a little bit. Oh, it's like the U.S. declining the handing over of bin Laden. I mean, that happened before 9/11 and also after 9/11 as well. So, yes, it is exactly like that. It really do be like that a little bit, but not, I mean... But even worse, because these are your own citizens. Like, you're supposed to care about your own citizens. That's the whole point, right? What the fuck? Why is there a goddamn government if you don't even give a shit about your own fucking citizens? It's crazy. Anyway, so we'll get into this as well. But the fact that the Israeli government said no to this originally on conditions that this would be propaganda is psychotic. And there is 0% chance that if Israeli media covers this, which, there are a lot of brave reporters in Israel right now doing that coverage, in spite of the fear that they have that they might go to jail. I need you to understand something, okay? There are people in Israel right now whom I disagree with on the maintenance of an apartheid state, on whom I disagree with on Zionism in general, and they are still recognizing the severity of the crisis at hand. They are still openly putting their fucking freedom on the line to report the news right now while they are supposedly slated to be arrested at gunpoint. That is fucking insane. That is fucking insane. On the other hand, of course, on the Palestinian side, reporters are just dying. They are straight up being murdered. They are straight up being killed by Israeli airstrikes. Yeah, well, this is an old interview. We saw this already. The irony is that the Israeli government doesn't care about their own Israeli citizens. Exactly what they accuse Hamas with Palestinian civilians. It's all pure projection. It's pure projection. It's pure projection, and the double standard only works if you just have an inherent bias towards the Palestinian, against the Palestinian disposition, the Palestinian position that they are human beings. If you do not see them as human beings, then that double standard kicks in. You do not consider the IDF having a base, having a headquarters in a fucking mall to be human shields. You do not consider the entire country having mandatory conscription to be a part of the human shield narrative. But you literally will turn around and say that people that have nothing to do with the Al-Qassam brigades, people that have nothing to do with Hamas in general, being killed, ruthlessly slaughtered by Israel is actually a perfectly valid reason. They're human shields. They're human shields. Yes, Roshdi Sarraj was killed yesterday. Oh, fuck. Anyway, America has blood on its hands, okay? This is 100% America's fault as well. What do I mean by this? What do I mean by this? America has all of the control in this regard. Do you understand? All of it. So much so that if you ask the defense minister, who literally said, we are dealing with human animals, and that's why we have to fucking shut their water, shut their food, and shut their electricity off. He was asked a question yesterday. Why are you letting humanitarian aid into Gaza? Shouldn't you be dealing with all of the Palestinians in Gaza? And he turned around and said, and I'm paraphrasing here, America asked us to allow humanitarian aid into Gaza. What are we supposed to do? We can't say no to the United States of America, which is true. It's true. Without America's support, this genocide would not be able to continue in the way that it is. We give Israel $4 billion a year. We co-designed the motherfucking Iron Dome. We give them our weapons. Okay? It is psychotic. It's insane. The U.S. weapons used in Gaza, this was manufactured by the company Woodward. The top shareholder in Woodward is Vanguard, which also has a charitable arm that is being used to funnel hundreds of millions to Israel lobby groups and the Friends of the IDF. I mean, yeah, this is America's death dealing, okay? They're doing it with our weapons. They're doing it with our weapons, which means we have all of the fucking power to say, hey, cut that shit out. Dial it back. Stop the occupation in its entirety. But we won't, because it corresponds to our personal interests to have a destabilizing force in a region. This is a national security interest that we have. Okay? It's outrageous. According to reports, the U.S. wants them to delay ground. Yeah, except Israel wants to delay the ground invasion anyway. And the more they delay the ground invasion, the more they just keep doing bombings. Roshdi Sarraj, a Palestinian journalist who worked for Radio France, was killed today in an Israeli bombing of the Tel Al-Hawa neighborhood in Gaza City, the network said. One of his last tweets from 5 days ago. Below, a lack of media coverage from Gaza due to the killing of more than 12 journalists, the bombing, and the blackout of electricity and the internet. However, we are still trying to withstand and continue coverage so the world can see the Israeli crimes in Gaza. He was the one who informed us first, the one who risked his life for this at a time when no one can enter. His last message was yesterday at 5:25 p.m., saying, "Thank you, Habibi, sending love and peace from Gaza." There is no world in which this is acceptable. There is no world in which this is anything but ethnic cleansing. It's completely unimaginable, okay? Habibi means my love. Scoop. The Biden administration recently sent a Marine 3-star general and several other U.S. military officers to Israel to help advise the Israeli military leadership in its operation in Gaza. Yeah, exactly. Of course. Israel has to be terrified of a ground invasion, in my opinion. The IDF isn't prepared to fight against an actual armed militant group. An actual armed militant group that also knows the lay of the land much better. An actual armed militant group in an area that's like mostly reduced to rubble, but still has a complex tunnel network underneath it, booby traps and the like. It would be devastating for the IDF. They've tried it before and they failed, both in Lebanon and also in Gaza as well. So they know what the consequences of a fucking ground invasion would look like into Gaza, which is precisely the reason why they do not want to do it, which is why they're trying to postpone it as best as possible, and just continuing to fucking engage in a war of attrition, or rather in this circumstance, because it's not two equal state actors, an ethnic cleansing campaign. Cutting off their food, only allowing a incredibly limited amount of water to be let into the Gaza Strip, cutting off the fuel in its entirety, not allowing fuel to come back into the Gaza Strip. The fuel that they claim is, going to be used by Hamas, except the fuel is necessary for the generators. The fuel is necessary for the fucking generators to work so that the hospitals can remain intact. But of course, they don't give a shit about hospitals. They clearly don't give a shit about hospitals. They've evacuated. They told every hospital to fucking evacuate in the Gaza Strip. That is fucking insane. German media is also 100% pro-Israel. It's disgusting, so they try to sue everyone who's even remotely pro-Palestine, and every Free Palestine demo is just called anti-Semitism. It's making me so mad. Thanks for being a human voice in this. Yes, Germany is fucking crazy, okay? They are out of their goddamn minds in Germany. The German government is up there with the English government. They are so unimaginably cruel with their championing of ethnic cleansing, okay? Which is not that shocking to me. There is a 1937 quote from Winston Churchill that is incredibly prescient for this very moment. If you were to hear what he had to say in 1937 about Palestinians and about, I believe, Native Americans in the United States of America, you would think, oh, Hitler said that. Except, no, it wasn't Hitler who said that. It was Winston fucking Churchill who said that, okay? So both of these countries have been led by people and still maintain that same historic perspective on someone's got to be ethnically cleansed at the end of the day. You know what I mean? You got to do it. No, it wasn't just about India. It was about Native Americans and also Palestinians, and I think Indians as well. But I think he was tying it to Indians. Does anyone have the video? Maybe you can find it. Where he calls them dogs. So yeah, something to consider. Okay. I'm seriously considering getting out of Germany because of recent events. Country is seriously broken. Yeah. All right, let's watch this humanitarian aid video, and then we'll get to the strategic release of
like a wasteland. Such bombing, say Palestinians, is indiscriminate by its very nature, resulting in thousands of casualties. No one's getting out of Gaza for now, but through the border with Egypt today, more than a dozen aid trucks did get in, carrying basic food and medical supplies after an initial transfer of 20 truckloads yesterday. But the UN says it's nowhere near the 500 trucks daily needed to sustain a population of more than 2 million.
30%, according to our sources, OCHA, of the infrastructure is already destroyed.
The UN says that many who fled south to escape Israeli bombing are now heading back to homes in northern Gaza towards the shelling. So dire is the humanitarian situation.
Some people will die if they don't get insulin on a regular basis. There are 50,000 pregnant women in Gaza. Water is absolutely necessary to keep them alive.
But the situation is set to worsen. Thousands of Israeli troops, tanks and heavy armour are preparing for a full-scale ground offensive in Gaza once bombing from the air achieves its objective. It's what Israel says it has to do if Hamas is to be crushed.
I have no doubt that Israel will need to go in on the ground to be able to effectively hurt and undermine and weaken Hamas, but also to be able to project power in this region and show the world and its other adversaries that are watching that we have capabilities. And I think it's a matter of day or days until that happens.
But Israel knows a land invasion of Gaza could trigger conflict in the wider region. In the Palestinian West Bank city of Jenin, Israel says it hit a Hamas cell, preparing for an attack. After cross-border skirmishes too in southern Lebanon, a warning from Israel's Prime Minister to Hezbollah militia and their sponsors Iran not to get involved. If Hezbollah decides to enter the war, they'll be making the biggest mistake of their lives and hit with unimaginable force, said the Prime Minister, talking to Israeli soldiers in the north today. One fact that Mr. Netanyahu can't control is the fate of more than 200 Israeli and international hostages held by Hamas in Gaza, whose families fear an Israeli invasion may put their lives in further danger. Winner Davis, BBC News, Jerusalem.
Also funny how Reddit is shitting on you with the Hasanabi, etc. when many were saying for years that they are your dick riders. What do you mean? I don't even know what that means. They're on Reddit. I don't care.
Well, as we've been reporting, a dire humanitarian crisis is unfolding in Gaza as Israel's war on Hamas continues. Our correspondent Rushdie Abu Alouf and his family have been displaced 4 times in Gaza in the last 2 weeks. Here's his assessment of the situation on the ground from an aid camp in the city of Khan Yunis, which is in the south of the territory.
About 2,000 families living in these tents. They are people displaced from the northern Gaza. This is a camp has been built by the UNRWA. I was speaking to the families here. They said they are struggling to find water. They are struggling to find food. They are struggling to find a bathroom. They said the bathroom here is a real challenge. They said security also is a real challenge because, as you know, Hamas has been under really heavy attack by Israel for the last 2 weeks or so. So there is no police around the area to maintain law and order. Few problems here, social problems in the area. But those people, they said, we have been given very little food, very little water, very little medicine to the people who are in need for this. This is an example of how 7,100 people who are displaced from the north are living in a very difficult condition in Gaza City.
Rushdie Abu Alouf reporting there. Now, world leaders are stepping up their diplomatic efforts to ease the conflict. On Sunday, President Biden spoke to Pope Francis about the aid efforts working towards peace and the need to prevent a regional escalation of the conflict. Mr. Biden also held 2 phone calls with Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Sunday. The White House says the 2 leaders agreed there would be a continuous flow of assistance.
Who would you say has contributed the most to this war? America. That's not even a question. England started it. America carried it on. It's not a war. It's a long and convoluted process of ethnic displacement. But America, for sure. I mean, it's not even a question. $4 billion every year. That's not even. America holds the keys to the castle. America could literally tell Israel tomorrow there's going to be a singular secular state, and Israel would have to comply. Now, of course, there would be a lot of terrorism, and I don't mean by Palestinians as a consequence of this, but you know, they have all of the power in this regard. They do, which is why if you look at how much propaganda, for example, the IDF engages in, there's a reason. There's a deliberate reason why a lot of it is Western focused. It's Western focused specifically so that they can still continue captivating Western audiences to ensure that they are complacent or misinformed about the ongoing ethnic cleansing campaign. Not even in this incursion, in this last siege. I mean, like across the board over the course of the past 75 fucking years, but especially so in the past couple of decades. England is responsible for the original formation, the British Mandate Palestine, and the mass immigration, and also the arming and training of the Zionist brigades at the time against the Arabs that lived there, right? And also literally turning a blind eye to the ethnic displacement that was occurring, the ethnic cleansing campaigns that were happening leading up to the Nakba and during the Nakba, okay? But even before the Nakba, there were British police forces stationed in British Mandate Palestine, and they specifically turned a blind eye to what Irgun and Lihi and the Haganah, the many different militant factions, some of which basically were at that point a standing army, a full-fledged standing army, were doing to the relatively powerless Palestinian villagers who were disarmed in general. And if you want to know if you want to understand like what the historically at least what the Zionist brigades did even before the Nakba, when England conceded to the Palestinian and Arab demands that were being made in the revolts from 1920s onward, okay? If you want to understand that, they blew up the British headquarters. The Zionist brigades blew up the British headquarters at King David Hotel and killed 91 people because England was trying to temper the Palestinian revolts by refusing to allow Jewish people to immigrate into British Mandate Palestine. They'd like shut it down completely. Anyway, why don't people say that the media is so fucking biased? I watched your interview with Piers and you said that he is a propaganda. I don't think I should talk about how biased the media is, and IOF intentionally killing people by bombing people and ambulances and even journalists. They have nothing to do with Hamas. Exactly. According to Bethany, we should make friends with Nazis. Mandel, the IDF is running out of helmets, and so soldiers are asking for donations. Yeah, I saw that. It's insane. How do these guys sell their whole inventory to the Russian mob? How else could they possibly have these kinds of shortages? I do not understand how, in the ever-loving fuck, that the IDF is running out of fucking helmets, dude. That's insane to me, okay? Like, I already pay my taxes. Like, what do you want? What more do you want? That's crazy. Personal request. A friend is serving on the Gaza Strip. Their unit is in dire need of new tactical helmets. The donation campaign is tax deductible and all proceeds will go to the specific troop. Every dollar counts. I don't get it. How do you not have a helmet in the IDF? Those goofy berets tucked under their epaulets? I think it's actually them laying the groundwork for the greatest excuse we've ever heard. Battle didn't count. We had no helmets, couldn't identify our own guys, and that's why there were 750 separate fatal friendly fire incidents. Yeah, a donation to the IDF being tax deductible is also hilarious because, you know, that's a bit of a double jeopardy in that situation if it wasn't. You know what I mean? It's like our taxes already pay for it, right? Oh, what is this? Things have gotten so bad in the IDF that Rabbi Shmuley has to fundraise to get his son's unit body armor after having to let them use his shoes because they ran out of size 10 boots. No fucking way. What the fuck? We are raising a quick $15K for my son Mendy's unit in the IDF to buy bulletproof vests. What the fuck? Bro, I don't get it. Settlers in the fucking West Bank. I think that it's inspiring that his son is the same age as him, at least. What? The world's oldest Zoomers. Fucking Felix, dude. Jesus Christ. That is nutty. This is, God. Is this some kind of scam? I don't know what is happening. Are they just like distributing all the rifles and all the fucking tactical gear to the settlers in the West Bank? What the fuck's going on? Ben-Gvir is literally handing out rifles right now as we speak to random dickheads with no military experience whatsoever, giving them fucking shields and shit. Meanwhile, you got IDF dudes on the line that are like, yeah, I don't have a shield. I don't have a helmet. I don't know what the fuck we're going to do. I don't have boots. What is happening? Where is the money going? What the fuck is going on? Here. You want to know where the fucking... This is what they're doing right now in the West Bank with the participation of Ben-Gvir, Israeli Minister of Security, beginning the distribution of 300 assault rifles to settlers in the northern West Bank. Now this, by the way, 10,000 small arms were purchased by Itamar Ben-Gvir specifically to hand to the hyper militant Messianic Jews, as Elon Pape calls them, that are specifically there to settle in the area and kill Palestinians. Okay. That is who he's giving the weapons to. These guys also, in many instances, have a fucking religious exemption. So they didn't even serve in the fucking IDF. They are literally there to do pogroms. They have done pogroms already, and they're going to keep doing pogroms. 91 Palestinians have died on the West Bank since the last siege. 91, as far as we know. They even did a bombing campaign. Are you pro-Israel or pro-Palestine? I'm pro-human, dog, okay? I'm pro-human, okay? If that to you translates to being pro on the side of the people doing ethnic cleansing right now, I don't know what to fucking tell you, okay? How is that hard to comprehend? I am anti-baby murder, okay? I am anti-baby murder. I am anti-war crimes. I know it's a brave stance to take, but I think murdering babies is fucking unjustifiable and unimaginable in every circumstance. That's so great. Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. Nice. Dude, anyone who doesn't recognize like the genuine cruelty and unimaginable awfulness that like the Israelis are committing here, the Israeli government is committing here, is blind to ethnic cleansing. And I'm sorry, I don't know how to convince you otherwise. Like I don't know what I can do to make you understand the situation. Here, in 1937, Winston Churchill said of the Palestinians, the Native Americans, and the Aboriginal Australians. Here, you want to know? Here's what he said.
In 1937, Winston Churchill said of the Palestinians, I quote, "I do not agree that the dog in a manger has the final right to the manger, even though he may have lain there for a very long time. I do not admit that right. I do not admit, for instance, that a great wrong has been done to the Red Indians of America or the black people of Australia. I do not admit that a wrong has been done to these people by the fact that a stronger race, a higher grade race, a more worldly wise race, to put it that way, has come in and taken their place."
Adolf Hitler. Nope, not Adolf Hitler. Motherfucking anti-Adolf Hitler, Winston Churchill. I'm so conflicted by this because, like, I've been watching the RAF dubs, okay? World War II history in color. And it's like he was so on board with battling it, with duking it out with the Germans, when Nazi Germany, at least Adolf Hitler specifically, was like kind of a fan of the British Empire, and seemingly was just more interested in you know, having the appeasement continue, and still escalated conflict, but in an effort to try to engage in conciliation, some kind of like conciliatory behavior from the British. And Churchill was the guy who was like, fuck no, we have to fucking fight tooth and nail. So that's also interesting because, like, how do you not recognize what's going on here? Like, on the one hand, you're like, no, dog, we can't do any more appeasement. You fucking keep blowing your load. Every time we do appeasement, you take more space. We're not letting that happen. Okay? But also simultaneously, you're like, I believe in everything that you're saying about the servile nature of the beast that isn't Anglo-Saxon. How is that possible? It doesn't make any fucking sense. He's literally just like saying Hitlerian shit while simultaneously being like, but Hitler, you're going too far. If South Africa was still in apartheid today, America would send a carrier to protect that apartheid, and the media would support the apartheid. I mean, I wonder what Joe Brandon would say today. It's very odd that he's like, Palestinians are dogs, they're inferior. A man who starved 4 million to death in India, facilitated Zionism and Wahhabism in the Middle East, ordered a massacre of anti-Nazi protesters in Greece, conceived black and tans to terrorize Ireland, and sought to keep Kenya's fertile land for white settlers who voted the Greatest Britain. Yeah. I mean, he's got his own fucking personal genocidal shit that he engaged in too. More proof that fascism is inevitably self-destructive. Hitler was just destroyed by a different fascist. No, South Africa near the end of apartheid, even neocons considered supporting South Africa to be way too politically costly. Yes, because the one major difference between South Africa and Israel was that Israel saw and learned from the lessons of South Africa and its apartheid falling apart. partially because, like, there were many different factors that played a role in the end of the South African apartheid, right? There wasn't the same viciousness at the time frame of like anti-black violence on very obvious, flagrant terms of having like a two-tier structure. It was a familiar story that was an important chapter in the American history, in the Western world's history. So that also created a way easier message to fight against and push for a BDS movement against apartheid South Africa. There was Israel saw all of that. Israel was also an apartheid state at the time and was friendly to the apartheid state of South Africa. These were, of course, very important allies in the anti-communist action that America was taking in the Cold War. And once the Cold War ended, then it was seen as like there were no more justifications, even on the Republican, the reactionary side, to be like, yeah, we should still keep maintaining this like very obviously incredibly racist, flagrantly obviously racist structure. Whereas at the end of the day, with Israel saw the difference there. Israel saw the way that the South African apartheid ended and learned from its mistakes, immediately destroyed any kind of BDS movement that could ever happen, and have successfully done that, by the way. There is no push for boycott, divestments, and sanctions in the state of Israel. It's basically legal to stop you from participating in that movement. That is a civil movement. Is a civil protest. It is a complete violation of the First Amendment laws in 36 states. They can legally ask you to sign a form that says you will never protest against Israel in order to get a job. That is fucking unimaginable, but that was done at the behest of the Israeli lobby, AIPAC. That's it. AIPAC wrote that legislation and very successfully pushed for it. I feel like the neoliberal consensus in the Cold War was like a McKinsey-style restructuring of fascism, globalized for cheap labor by exporting exploitation out of sight. Yes, I think that's a good assessment. So ultimately, I think that there's a reason why Israel has been able to maintain its apartheid regime, whereas South Africa has not been able to. And part of that is because of the long-standing dehumanization campaign, not done by Israel, mind you, but done by the Western media on Arabs and Iranians and anyone that's in the Middle East that is not Israeli, basically. There are many different components that political forces that play a role in the propping up of the apartheid regime in Israel. So it's a more complicated. At least if the situation itself is not complicated, it's an apartheid. It's fucked up. It's gross. It's morally abhorrent. But if you look at like the reasons as to why apartheid South Africa failed and had to dissolve, whereas the apartheid regime is continued in Israel, there are, of course, many different forces at play here. So Israel also killed the many different Nelson Mandelas of Gaza and of Palestine. So there is that too. What are the chances that the Israeli people revolt and stage a revolution to rid themselves of Western influence? Less than zero. That is literally the least likely thing that will ever happen. That will never, ever, ever in a million years happen. There is a lot of there are a lot of people on the ground that are just very excited at the prospect of this continued occupation and ethnic cleansing, I would even say. There's definitely a lot more support for that than there is for the top of the hour ad break, which comes at the top of every hour. If you no longer want to see those ads, all you need to do is subscribe for $5 or free with a Twitch Prime by connecting your Amazon Prime account to your Twitch account, where you get one free Prime subscription a month. Use it on your favorite broadcaster. Hopefully that's me. Here's the 3-minute ad break now. Okay.
Assistance into Gaza. Mr. Biden also thanked Mr. Netanyahu for his assistance in the release of 2 US hostages on Friday. The leaders of the US, UK, Canada, France, Germany and Italy spoke on Sunday, and several European leaders are expected in Israel this week, including French President Emmanuel Macron. Well, let's go live now to our Middle East correspondent, Yolande Nell, who is in Jerusalem for us. Yolande, first of all, before we talk about the diplomacy and the imminent visits this week, what's been happening overnight?
Well, quite important, a conversation between the US President Joe Biden and the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Of course, there are lots of fears building up about a wider regional war and also about the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip. And after Joe Biden had spoken to Mr. Netanyahu, the White House put out a statement saying there would now be this continuous flow of critically needed assistance going into Gaza. This after 14 lorries entered late on Sunday evening and 20 lorries the day before. Now, then Joe Biden went on a round of calls with different world leaders, including Rishi Sunak, the British Prime Minister, and they put out this joint statement. They expressed support for Israel's right to defend itself, but also called for adherence to international law, in particular the protection of civilians. And that's a very important point. It does seem that it was another very intense aerial bombardment of Gaza overnight. We're getting reports from Palestinian media that this was one of the worst nights so far, with a great deal of people killed.
And Emmanuel Macron is due to arrive tomorrow, is that correct?
It was not made exactly clear. We know that he is supposed to be coming along with the Dutch leader this week. Other visits scheduled, but it will, we think, now be on Tuesday that Emmanuel Macron comes. Of course, you know, it will be a similar message, reinforcing what Rishi Sunak has said, what the US president has said, coming also with the US Secretary of State. There have been these repeated visits to show strong support of Israel after it suffered its deadliest attack in its 75-year history. But also now with 1.5 million people almost displaced inside Gaza, this military offensive expected to go on. The defense minister said it could go on for 1, 2 or 3 months to crush Hamas in Gaza. There is real worry about what happens on the ground. You know, the amount of aid that's going in at the moment, the UN says that the number of lorries entering is equivalent to about 4% of what would enter on normal day to send food and other supplies into the Gaza Strip via Israel before Israel put the Gaza Strip under siege. What is desperately needed, and there's been a specific call for it from the UN, is fuel to go into Gaza also, because fuel is needed, of course, for hospitals to be able to run generators so that they can continue to provide care to the mounting numbers of wounded people and sick as well. And then you also need the electricity so that they can pump away sewage, that they can pump clean water for people. Otherwise, there could be, you know, waterborne diseases that break out.
Yolande, what's the latest as well on the hostages? Of course, we saw the two US hostages released on Friday. Any more developments on the others who are still missing?
I mean, there have been repeated protests over the weekends, or demonstrations by the families of those more than 200 people. They're Israelis and also foreign nationals who are being held by Hamas and other armed factions in the Gaza Strip. Of course, with this very intense bombardment going on and the lack of aid going in, that really scares people. And last night, when there were members of these families meeting the Israeli president, they really put that point to him. They said that their loved ones must not be forgotten, and they also called for some aid, like medical aid, to be allowed in, hoping that that would also benefit the hostages.
OK, Yolande, for now, thank you so much. Yolande Nell, who is in Jerusalem for us.
Well, it's now been 17 days since the war in Gaza began, and Israel is continuing its bombing campaign. At least 400 Palestinians have been killed in some of the worst overnight attacks on the territory, according to health officials in Gaza. Well, humanitarian aid does continue to enter as hospitals are in dire need of medical supplies. Thousands of Palestinians seeking shelter in schools are now receiving some aid, but people say what they need most is for the attacks to stop. On Monday, Israeli airstrikes hit several locations, including neighborhoods in Gaza City. Now, many families and children have been displaced after their homes were left in ruins. And Israeli forces have intensified raids too in the occupied West Bank. Dozens of Palestinians were detained there overnight, 2 killed during an Israeli raid in the Jalazon refugee camp. Now, since the start of the war on October 7th, more than 5,000 Palestinians have lost their lives in Gaza, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry. In the occupied West Bank, Israeli forces have killed 95 in the past 2 weeks. In Israel, 1,400 people were killed in Hamas's military operation. Harry Fawcett begins our coverage.
Nighttime brings no respite for Palestinians in Gaza. Instead, more death, more destruction. The Israeli army says it hit 320 targets during the night, children among the victims. Gaza's health ministry says about 2,000 have been killed so far. Medical and rescue crews worked through the dark to pull people from the rubble. Their only lights, torches and car headlamps. Electricity is scarce in the strip under a complete blockade by Israel. Rescue workers and volunteers are sent scrambling by another Israeli missile strike nearby. Those rescued are taken to one of the dwindling number of hospitals still functioning, but even there the threat is constant. Another bomb near the Al-Quds hospital, creating panic for those inside. And the strikes continued further south, where the Israeli army has been telling Palestinians to flee.
We were told that Khan Yunis is considered to be a safe place, and everyone came here from the north or from Gaza City. But unfortunately, last night was the hardest night so far we saw in Khan Yunis.
When we moved to Khan Yunis with my family, there were 17 of us. Then after the Israelis hit us and betrayed us, there's only 4 of us left. I can't understand how the 4 of us will live, and how we will return to our home in Gaza City after 17 of us used to live together. This is a real nightmare, one I will never forget for the rest of my life.
Nearby, what aid has so far got in through Egypt is being sorted and prioritized.
It is mainly medical supplies for the hospitals. There is also a small amount of food supplies which we had received. We will work with the Palestinian Red Crescent to start distribution instantly to those in need. We will distribute in the south and are hoping to reach to the north of Gaza to deliver the aid for those in need.
Some of that work is now underway, but aid agencies continue to call for a sustained, reliable supply, one that includes desperately needed fuel for a population under siege and under unrelenting bombardment. Harry Fawcett, Al Jazeera.
Well, the Qassam Brigades has now released video footage showing the launch of its kamikaze drones into Israeli territory. The military wing of Hamas said it targeted sites in Israel for the first time since its offensive more than 2 weeks ago. Well, let's speak to Al Jazeera's Hani Abu Sheba. He's live for us from Khan Yunis in the Gaza Strip.
The New York Times officials think they've killed 13 Hamas officials in the bombings. What the fuck? Are you serious? Only 13? That's insane.
Hani, we have been now hearing about a third aid convoy that's heading into the Strip. Do we know where the aid that's gotten in so far has gone?
Yes, for the past half an hour, we received reports confirming the entrance of the third batch of humanitarian aid from the Egyptian side. Those trucks were arrived this morning at the Egyptian side from Al Arish city. They were checked, cleared, and then transferred to designated United Nations trucks. And then at this particular hour, they have been allowed to enter the Palestinian territories. Now, these aid are going to be taken from the area of the Rafah crossing all the way to designated UNRWA warehouses where they will be sorted and prioritized. So far, we know the United Nations and its operations branch have prepared lists and made and specify locations where those aids are going to be. We don't know exactly where, but we know the lists have been prepared and exact locations have been also identified for these aids to be delivered. We also received a report from a source confirming the arrival of a fourth batch of medical supplies, only medical supplies, and a medical team arriving at Al Arish airport on the Egyptian side. We don't know when this is going to be entering Gaza. It could be tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, depending on the coordination process. It's necessary to point out that so far, these aid convoy only contain food supplies and medical supplies. There is zero fuel supplies entering the Gaza Strip. Now, it's also important to mention that 20 trucks, even 40 or 50 or 100, it's just so little compared to the needs of the Palestinian Gaza Strip. Gaza needs daily 500 trucks of aid, of food supplies, medical supplies, and other supplies.
Hani, we know some 400 people have been killed just in the last 24 hours. And the strikes are continuing in the south where people have fled, where you are currently. What have you been seeing and hearing?
Well, for the past hour, we worked on verifying the number, and we learned from a source at the Ministry of Health that the number of people who have been killed throughout the past 24 hours have reached 500 people now, and it's in an official statement by the Ministry of Health. All of this is happening under a mass bombardment and airstrike. Just at about 3 o'clock, we were preparing for a live from the hospital, a house a few hundred meters away from the main entrance of the hospital was targeted by four missiles, and those kind of missiles are the warning that are sent by Israeli drones in a preparation for complete destruction by an F-16. It's a very scary scene right now because everybody is anxious and expecting a bomb being dropped at any moment.
I'm sure that sounds terrifying. Hani Abu Sheba, they're on the ground for us from Khan Yunis in the Gaza Strip. Thank you so much, Hani, and please stay safe.
As the bombing continues, the U.S. is advising a delay in Israel's ground invasion of Gaza, even as hundreds of thousands of troops are massed at the border there. Holly Williams reports now on that part of the story and what all this could mean for the hostages still being held in Gaza.
As Israel prepares for a ground invasion of the Gaza Strip.
Max's weird takes on other issues with excellent done or work on Gaza. Any chance you can give us who's joining? Just joining a rundown on what's going on. Yes. The Israeli forces are prepping for a ground invasion into Gaza. They have done their bombing campaign is continuing, and there is a hostage release that occurred. Ben Shapiro is talking shit about you. Yeah, I don't care. Not surprising, but who cares? Hold on.
The heartland of Hamas, its prime minister visited with his troops. It's do or die, Benjamin Netanyahu told them. They need to die. And on Israel's northern border with Lebanon, deadly exchanges of fire with Hezbollah, another militant group with...
Why don't you debate Ben on this? Wait, what? Did Ben Shapiro ask to debate me on this? Because I've never said no to that. Like, I would be perfectly fine in having that conversation with Ben. Telegram channel showed that Israel has no trust in his army. So much internal conflict going on, and Netanyahu's going into this last venture knowing whatever the result of this war, he's fucked. He's been advised on the sheer amount of shelling is counterproductive to the infantry. Ben would probably debate Bassem over you. Easier for him. He would never debate you. He was asked many times to debate from Mohammed Hijab. The guy can't only talk to high school teenagers. No, I'm pretty bad at debating. So I think Ben would possibly do it. But yeah.
Ties to Iran are fueling fears this conflict.
Do you think they'll actually invade? I think Israel is too scared. I think that there are conflicting forces that have an appetite for blood internally at Israel. And those interests have to be soothed, whatever the word is. Like someone has to. You suck at debating, Hassan. I love you, but Bassam would cook him more. I mean, I suck at debating, and I think I can still hold my own against Ben Shapiro. I'm perfectly fine and perfectly interested in doing that. Satiated. Thank you. I have never said no to debating Ben Shapiro on this issue or on any issue at all, as a matter of fact. But as far as a you have to stop being so self-deprecating. That's my job. I mean, I don't care. I just don't give a shit. What? Ben Shapiro clearly ignored.
Involved in this controversy now is Hassan Piker. He used to be associated with the Young Turks, and now he is.
What is this? This is an old ass video. They won't go beyond Gaza. China sent 6 warships, and Iran is doing proxy attacks. Wait, no, China's 6 warships are not new. It's usual. It's usually usual military training, and not only that, but also China is not going to fucking fight against Israel, dude. What are you guys talking about? Please stop. There are people who want this invasion to occur. I think that the invasion. Ground invasion would be devastating for the IDF. Whereas right now they could just keep lobbing missiles from the sky and keep destroying whatever will the Palestinian people have in general to survive. They can keep trying to starve out the population. Ultimately, it's much easier, even if they kill only 13 Hamas officials, let's say, and 5,000 civilians in general. It's just the overarching goal there is to open up a new area of Gaza to permanently occupy, to permanently annex. Okay? It's not necessarily about dealing with Hamas. I think that there's a mistake here. If you think that like Israel's genuine opinion is to take out Hamas and rid the Gaza Strip of Hamas's influence, you've been blinded by the propaganda. I do not think that Israel's goal there is to take out Hamas. I think the goal there is to annex parts of Gaza. Potentially. Or do as much terror as possible to the Palestinian population in general, that they feel like they have adequately retaliated.
Could expand. There was some good news on Friday night when 2 American hostages were released. Judith Ranan and her daughter Natalie from Evanston, Illinois, were visiting relatives here when they were kidnapped. Today, Israel raised the number of confirmed hostages to 222. The US says that among them are more Americans.
There's Americans stuck in Gaza right now. We want to get them out. There are hostages in Gaza right now. We want to get them out as well.
A visiting delegation of American.
Yeah, except I think that Cory Booker's alone on that. As far as I've heard, that there are Americans in Gaza, for example, and they have been basically condemned to live in that hellish circumstance, that the embassy is not responding to their calls, and they're not doing anything to like take out the American citizens that are currently stuck in Gaza and allow them to leave the Gaza Strip, which is crazy. But of course, you're on the lowest part of the totem pole if you are a Palestinian American. You know, you have no rights. You're worse than all of the other Americans. You know what I mean?
And senators is another show of support for Israel.
Do you think that Israel should delay its ground invasion until every avenue is attempted to get the hostages out?
Israel should destroy Hamas. How you do it is subject to debate. We stand with Israel without apology.
This is a very cowardly way to assess the situation. Oh, well, up to debate. It's like, is it? Okay. Well, I'm saying it's fucking immoral and wrong. What are you saying? You're saying it's moral and good. Okay, debate over, I guess. You think ethnic cleansing. You think 2,000 children dead, 2,000 children murdered by Israeli rocket fires is an acceptable amount of collateral damage in Israel's retaliation. I do not. There's the debate for you. If you want to have a debate on the matter, this is my position. I don't like it. I don't think it's justifiable. I don't think it's appropriate.
And everybody who dies forward, I blame Hamas.
But for the families of the hostages, it's agonizing. Their loved ones are being held in the same place that Israel's bombarding.
Why they took children, why they took women, why?
Mai Yerel Shami's sister, Eden, was taken captive by Hamas militants at a festival where the gunmen killed at least 260 people. Eden called her family as she was being kidnapped, and they recorded it. "They've got me," she said.
2 American hostages were freed late on Friday. How did you feel about that?
Of course, we was happy. It gives us hope.
People that fucking rip these posters are so stupid, by the way. Like, I don't know what the fuck is wrong with people that do shit like that. Like, they've been posting these posters all around America, all around the UK, everywhere in Israel. And it's such a weird fucking thing to do. It's such a gross thing to do. Like, it's unimaginable. It's unimaginable. It says nothing about, like, the overarching Palestinian emancipation, of course, from where I'm standing. But it's so disrespectful and gross. It's obvious Zionist propaganda law. I don't give a fuck. What do you mean it's obvious Zionist propaganda? The fuck are you talking about? Those people are still missing. What is wrong with you? Like, that's insane. That you're an insane person, okay? You've lost your fucking mind at that point. If you think that, like, children with missing posters is not and should not be allowed to be posted. Okay? It's an insane thing to say. Okay? It's cruel, it's unusual, and you're basically fucking lending a hand to unironic propaganda for Israel if you say stupid shit like that. Okay? From the perspective of the likes of, Benjamin Netanyahu or other groups, it's like there's nothing better than to see some dude be like, oh, free Palestine. I'm doing this because I want to free Palestine. It's akin to the gross and immoral misconduct by charlatans that go to fucking protests and yell horrifyingly anti-Semitic shit. Okay? There's a reason why the ADL conflates anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. Okay? So when you actually do engage in anti-Semitic shit while claiming that you're doing it under the auspices of anti-Zionism, you are quite literally doing a disservice. You're gross, you're immoral, you're stupid, and you're doing a disservice to the cause that you claim to care about. Crying for dead Israelis is like crying for dead Spanish conquerors who died trying to colonize Mexico, or dead Ottomans who died trying to colonize the rest of the world. Yeah, dude, you're right. Crying for fucking a kidnapped baby is the same. You're so stupid. Shut the fuck up, please. Please just shut your fucking mouth, okay? Just shut it. Just shut it. You're like, you are the guy that all of these fucking annoying libtards constantly point to and say, oh my God, look at how violent the left is. Look at how violent the left is. Like, you're making yourself out to be the cartoonish depiction of this, like, supposedly scary vanguard militant leftist out there. It's so dumb. Don't you say that the optics argument is irrelevant? When we're having an internal conversation in the Western world, when there's, like, mass mobilization occurring, the optics conversation is very relevant. It's not as relevant as the way that right-wingers make it out to be or liberals make it out to be. It's ultimately, in the grand scheme of things, a silly, nonsensical way to claim that all anti-Zionist protests are actually anti-Semitic in nature. But I am, of course, going to do my own cleanup in my own fucking community if I have people in here that are saying idiotic shit that lends credence to said idiotic fucking assessments. Of course. Me saying the optics conversation is irrelevant is in the actions that Hamas engages in or Palestinian militias engage in, okay? They don't care because they're fucking dying. You live in Ohio. You are in America. Your job and your goal is to be careful and not say some stupid fucking shit that will be used against Palestinian emancipation down the fucking line. Because every single person is out there to go, look, I knew it. These guys are anti-Semitic. So if there are people who are saying unhinged shit that are careless and callous, thinking that they can get away with the blood and soil propaganda that like defenders of Israel can get away with in the United States of America, well, you're wrong. Not only are you immoral, and I don't agree with you, but you're also wrong. You can't say that. Richie Torres can go up there and say every Palestinian deserves to be ruthlessly slaughtered, and people will not even fucking second guess him. But if you are defending Palestinians, you have to be incredibly fucking careful when you're here in the United States of America and trying to do as best as you can to advocate for Palestinian liberation.
Damn, this guy's good.